The rejected Omega lifted the moon-sealed lid and awakened the Alpha King frozen in time for her. The wind whispered through the skeletal trees of the outer forest, carrying with it secrets of long-forgotten times. Shadows stretched across the ground like dark fingers, and the moon hung low, its silver glow bathing the forest in a cold, pale light. In this world of kings and warriors, Omegas were often overlooked, dismissed as weak or fragile. Yet even the smallest of souls could hold the power to change fate. Leora, a young Omega, had learned this the hard way. Rejected by her pack for reasons she could never fully understand, she had grown up on the edge of the kingdom, living in a small cottage abandoned by time. Her hair was dark like midnight, and her eyes, a stormy gray, always seemed to be searching for something beyond the horizon. Every day, the villagers whispered behind their hands about the fragile Omega who walks alone. She had become used to their pity and their fear, yet a fire burned quietly inside her, a longing for something greater than survival. Her life had been quiet, almost unbearably so. Days passed in the repetition of chores and simple meals, while nights brought dreams she could not explain. In those dreams, she wandered through corridors of ice, vast palaces frozen under moonlight. And always there was a voice, a deep, commanding voice calling her name, echoing through centuries. Leora would wake with a start, her heart pounding, convinced she had imagined it. But the ache of that voice lingered, and she knew it was a calling she could not ignore. Stories in her village told of the moon-sealed tomb, hidden deep within the forest. It was said that a great Alpha King had been imprisoned there long ago, frozen in time by a curse. The villagers said the tomb was forbidden, that even the bravest warriors dared not approach it. Many believed it held only death and madness. But to Leora, the tales felt like a thread pulling her forward, guiding her to a destiny she did not yet understand. One night, the moon was full and bright, spilling silver across the forest floor. Leora felt a pull stronger than she had ever felt before. She wrapped herself in her cloak, taking only a small lantern, and ventured into the trees. Her feet moved almost of their own accord, following paths hidden by shadow and thorns. The air grew colder as she approached, and the forest seemed to hush, as if holding its breath. Finally, she found it. The tomb was nothing like she had imagined. It was vast, carved from black stone that shimmered faintly under the moonlight. Strange runes covered its surface, glowing faintly with a light that seemed alive. At its center lay the moon-sealed lid, an enormous slab of crystal-like stone that reflected the moon in 1,000 fractured pieces. Leora felt her pulse quicken. Her hands trembled as she reached out, almost afraid to touch it, yet compelled by a force she could not name. As her fingers grazed the cool surface, a strange warmth spread through her. It was as if the tomb recognized her, and she felt a shiver of both fear and anticipation. The wind howled around her, and the trees seemed to lean closer, watching. With all the strength she could muster, Leora lifted the lid. A surge of energy burst forth, and the forest seemed to spin. Frost swirled like mist, and the runes on the tomb glowed brighter, illuminating the features of the figure inside. He was magnificent even in stillness. Encased in ice, the Alpha King lay perfectly preserved, his features noble and commanding. His dark hair fanned around his head like a shadow, and even frozen, his presence radiated power. Leora could feel it pressing against her chest, filling her with a mixture of awe, fear, and a strange, magnetic longing. For a moment she froze, unable to breathe, unable to speak. Then a crack echoed through the tomb. Ice shattered under her touch, and a fragment fell to the ground with a sharp ring. The Alpha's eyes, like storm clouds caught in sunlight, flickered as if sensing her. Leora's heart leapt in both terror and wonder. She had awakened him. The voice from her dream seemed to grow louder in her mind, no longer a whisper but a song that tugged at her very soul. Kalen, the Alpha King, stirred, his awakening slow and deliberate. For centuries, he had lain in frozen silence, betrayed and cursed, trapped between life and death. Now he opened his eyes, and the first thing he saw was Leora, the Omega who had lifted the lid. Anger, confusion, and disbelief flickered across his face, but beneath it all, a deeper, unspoken recognition lingered. Somehow, he knew she had come for him. The tomb trembled. Shadows moved along the walls, stretching and twisting in unnatural ways. Whispers echoed through the chamber, voices that seemed to rise from the stones themselves. They spoke of a prophecy, of bonds forged in moonlight, of destinies intertwined across centuries. Leora's breath caught. She did not understand the words, but she felt their weight pressing down on her, a burden and a promise all at once. Kaelin's first words were low and commanding, filled with the authority of a king who had not ruled for 100 years. "Who dares disturb my rest?" His voice rumbled like distant thunder, filling the tomb with tension. Leora's voice trembled as she replied, I am Leora. I didn't mean to, I had to know." Kaelin's eyes narrowed. He studied her, and for the first time in centuries he felt something other than rage. There was courage in her, fragile yet undeniable. There was curiosity, a spark of defiance that he remembered from the Omegas of old legends. And there was a strange connection, a pull that neither of them could explain. "You are weak," he said finally, his tone cutting but thoughtful. "And yet you dared to awaken me. Why?" Leora swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the centuries pressing on her shoulders. I didn't know, but I felt something calling me. You were calling me." For a moment, Kaelin said nothing. The air between them shimmered with tension, fear, and the possibility of something neither of them understood. The shadows whispered louder, the runes glowing brighter. The energy from the broken ice lingered, wrapping around them like a cloak of destiny. Then, without warning, the tomb shuddered violently. Dust fell from the ceiling and cracks ran along the walls. Leora stumbled back, her lantern swinging wildly, casting dancing light across the chamber. "What is happening?" she cried. Kaelin rose to his feet, towering and majestic even in the dim light. His eyes blazed with power, and the air around him seemed to hum. "It begins," he said, his voice a low growl. "You have awakened me, and with me the old forces stir. There are those who will come for us, and they will not be merciful." His gaze softened for a fraction of a second as it fell on Leora. "You do not know what you have done or what you have begun." Leora felt a chill that was not from the cold. She had lifted the moon-sealed lid, and now her life was no longer her own. She felt fear, yes, but also an undeniable thrill. The voice that had haunted her dreams seemed to whisper again, no longer distant. "You are the key, only you can stand with me." She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I don't know how," she said quietly, "but I will help. Whatever comes, I will not leave you alone." Kaelin studied her in silence, the tension between them thick enough to cut. Slowly he nodded, a mixture of grudging respect and deep curiosity in his gaze. Perhaps you are not as weak as you seem. But know this, Omega, the path ahead is treacherous. You may not survive it." The tomb fell silent once more, save for the distant howl of wind outside. Yet in the quiet, the forest seemed alive, as if acknowledging that something had changed. A destiny had been set in motion, one that would bind an exiled Omega and a frozen king together against forces older than the kingdom itself. And as Leora looked at Kaelin, standing tall amidst shattered ice and glowing runes, she knew one thing with certainty. Her life, her very soul, would never be the same again. The moonlight gleamed across the tomb, reflecting in her eyes, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. The wind carried a strange chill as Leora and Kaelin stepped out of the shattered tomb. The moonlight shone down on them, pale and cold, but it also seemed to guide them, highlighting the path through the forest. The shadows of the trees stretched long and twisted, as if the forest itself were watching them, aware that an ancient power had returned to the world. Kaelin's presence was overwhelming. Even after awakening from a century of frozen silence, his authority was unmistakable. Each step he took seemed to command the very air around him, bending it slightly with invisible weight. Leora felt both fear and fascination in equal measure. She could sense the storm of emotions raging within him, anger at being trapped, grief for lost centuries, and a sharp edge of distrust for anyone who dared disturb his tomb. And yet beneath it all there was a flicker of something else, a curiosity about her, the Omega who had dared to wake him. "I need to understand," Kalen finally said, his voice low but firm, carrying the weight of a king who had once ruled an empire. "Why did you awaken me?" "Do you know what you have done?" Leora shook her head, her hair rustling in the cold wind. "I did not mean to, I just felt something calling me. You were calling me." Her words trembled, but there was a strange strength behind them. Kalen's gaze softened, though only slightly. He studied her as if trying to read her very soul. "The tomb was sealed for a reason," he said slowly. "Not just to punish me, but to protect the world from what would follow if I awoke too soon." Leora's heart skipped a beat. What will follow?" Kalen's eyes darkened. "Enemies older than your memory, powers that were bound when I was imprisoned, forces that will not forgive my return, and forces that will see you as a target for bringing me back." The forest seemed to close in around them as he spoke. Leora shivered, not from the cold but from the weight of his words. She realized that awakening Kalen was only the beginning. Whatever destiny awaited them, it would not be easy. And yet, despite the fear curling in her chest, she felt an unshakable pull toward him. Something about him called to her, as if their souls had been linked long before the tomb had frozen him in time. They began to move through the forest cautiously. The trees seemed to whisper, the wind carrying faint echoes of voices from the past. Leora noticed the way shadows shifted around them, moving as though alive. She knew instinctively that this was no ordinary forest. It had been touched by the same magic that had sealed Kalen. "Stay close," Kalen said abruptly, his voice carrying authority that made Leora start. "There are those who have waited for me to return. They will come." "I will stay," she replied, determination settling in her chest. She could not explain why, but she felt she belonged with him, whether he wanted her there or not. As they walked, Kalen began to explain fragments of his story. He had been the Alpha King of a vast kingdom, strong and just, until betrayal had frozen him in time. A council of rogue alphas, jealous of his power and fearful of his influence, had used a dark curse to imprison him. Kalen had been taken unaware, bound in ice beneath the moon's light and left to wait for centuries. Leora listened, absorbing every word. She sensed his pain, the weight of loss and betrayal that had hung over him for 100 years. And she realized that this king, this figure of myth and legend, was not only powerful but deeply human beneath the armor of rage and pride. Hours passed as they navigated the forest. The moon climbed higher and the shadows grew darker. Leora could sense the presence of others, hidden eyes tracking their movement, waiting for the right moment to strike. She had never felt so aware, so alert. Even her own senses seemed sharpened, as though the connection to Kalen had awakened something within her. Suddenly, a figure stepped from the shadows, cloaked and silent. Kalen tensed, his body coiled like a spring ready to strike. "Stay behind me," he commanded, his voice sharp, and Leora obeyed, feeling both fear and the thrill of being near him. The figure raised its hands, revealing the faint shimmer of dark magic. "Alpha King Kalen," the stranger said, voice low and dangerous, "you have been gone for far too long. Your return will not be tolerated." Kalen's eyes narrowed. "And you are?" "An emissary," the figure said, bowing slightly. "A warning. Forces you cannot imagine are moving even now. The council that betrayed you still rules in shadows, and they will do anything to destroy the one who awakened you." Leora felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. She had known the awakening would have consequences, but hearing the danger spoken aloud made it real. Yet, when she looked at Kalen, she saw something that surprised her, a flicker of determination, a spark of the king he had been before his imprisonment. "We will face them," Kalen said, his voice steady, though the tension in his posture betrayed the storm within. "But not alone." He turned his gaze to Leora. "You must understand this is no place for weakness. If you stay with me, you must learn to protect yourself. And I must learn to trust you." Leora's breath caught. Trust him. The weight of his words was heavy, yet it carried an unspoken invitation. "I will do whatever it takes," she said quietly, her eyes meeting his. "I will not leave you." They continued their journey, moving cautiously through the forest. As they walked, Kalen began to teach her. Small lessons at first, how to sense the presence of others, how to move silently, how to let the moonlight guide her. Leora discovered that her Omega blood carried more than empathy and instinct. It carried a connection to magic, subtle but potent. She could feel the forest, the wind, the very shadows around them. And as she learned, Kalen began to look at her differently, not as a fragile Omega, but as an ally, a companion, someone whose courage could match his own. Their nights were filled with whispered conversations and unspoken understanding. Sometimes Kalen would sit silently, gazing into the firelight, lost in memories of the kingdom he had ruled and the betrayal that had frozen him. Leora would sit beside him, feeling the weight of his sorrow, her hand brushing his without intention. Neither spoke of the bond that was growing, but it was there, silent and undeniable. Yet danger was never far. One night, while they rested near a stream, Leora sensed it first, a presence moving through the trees, silent but deadly. She froze, her instincts screaming, and Kalen's eyes followed her gaze. In an instant, he was on his feet, his body coiled, ready for the strike. A shadow emerged from the darkness, moving with unnatural speed. Leora's heart pounded, but she did not flee. She raised her hand, letting the magic she had only recently discovered flow through her. Moonlight wrapped around her fingers, a subtle shield that caught the first attack. Kalen moved with precision, his strikes swift and controlled, protecting her as they fought together. When the shadow retreated, leaving only silence behind, Leora felt a surge of exhilaration and relief. I did it," she whispered, her voice trembling. Kalen's gaze softened, though only slightly. "Yes," he said quietly, "and you will do more. But you must learn, Omega, that this path will not be easy. The Council will not stop, and there are powers at work that even I cannot fully control." As dawn broke, painting the forest in shades of pink and gold, Leora and Kalen paused to rest. She looked at him, truly looked, and saw not just a king or a warrior, but a man shaped by centuries of pain, yet still capable of hope. "Kalen," she said softly, "we will face them together. I am not afraid." For a moment he simply stared at her, the storm in his eyes giving way to something quieter, something almost like trust. And then he nodded. "Together," he said, his voice low but resolute. "We will face them together." But even as they walked on, the shadows of the past were not idle. Far from the forest, figures watched, whispering Kalen's name and tracing the steps of the Omega who had dared to lift the moon-sealed lid. The prophecy had begun, and the forces of darkness would not rest until they had tested the strength of both King and Omega. Leora felt it, a shiver running through her. Danger awaited, but so did destiny. And as she glanced at Kalen, standing tall and commanding despite centuries of imprisonment, she knew that she had found something she never expected. Not just the king frozen in time, but a chance to rewrite history together. The forest seemed alive around them, shadows moving like silent sentinels, and the wind carried the faintest echo of voices long gone. The journey had only begun, and already the bond between the Alpha King and the once-rejected Omega was growing, a bond that would be tested by darkness, betrayal, and the weight of a world that had nearly forgotten him. The forest had grown quiet, but Leora knew better than to trust silence. The encounter with the assassin lingered in her mind, a sharp reminder that danger would always follow them. Yet, as she walked beside Kaelin, she felt a strange sense of purpose she had never known. She was no longer just a rejected Omega. She was a companion to a king, and her presence mattered in ways she was only beginning to understand. Kaelin moved with his usual precision, his eyes scanning every shadow, every flicker of movement. He was a man awakened from centuries of stillness, yet his instincts remained sharp. Leora admired him, not just for his power, but for the control he held over himself, even when the world around him seemed ready to erupt into chaos. "We must leave the forest," Kaelin said, his voice steady, carrying authority and concern in equal measure. "The council will not rest until they have tested both of us. We need a place to gather strength, a sanctuary where you can learn to harness the power you have awakened." Leora nodded. "I'm ready," she said quietly, feeling the strange stir of courage within her. She had survived rejection and isolation. This was a challenge she could meet. They traveled for hours, moving through dense trees and across rocky streams. Kaelin taught her to sense danger, to feel the flow of magic in the air, and to trust the instincts she had always ignored. Leora discovered a connection to the moonlight, subtle at first, like the soft pulse of a heartbeat. She could guide it, let it touch her hands and rise in a faint glow, enough to illuminate the dark path before them. "You have power, Leora," Kaelin said one night, as they rested near a small stream. The water reflected the moonlight, casting a silver glow on their faces. "More than most Omegas, but power is useless without control, and control is useless without courage." "I am trying," she whispered. She had never been trained in magic or combat. Her entire life had been ordinary, filled with small chores and the silent pain of being unwanted. Yet here, beside this king who had returned from 100-year sleep, she felt extraordinary. Kaelin studied her, his stormy eyes reflecting both admiration and a trace of doubt. "Trying is not enough," he said. "You must be willing to risk everything. The council will test not just your power, but your will." The next morning, they reached a clearing in the mountains, a hidden sanctuary carved into the cliffs. The wind was sharp, carrying with it the scent of cold stone and wildflowers, a strange combination of danger and beauty. Here, Leora would begin her training. For weeks, Kaelin taught her the art of survival. She learned to move silently, to listen to the forest, and to sense the presence of others. More importantly, she learned to trust her connection to him, to feel the pulse of his power and let it guide her own. Every lesson brought them closer, not just in skill, but in trust and understanding. One night, as they practiced near the edge of a cliff overlooking the valley below, Kaelin spoke softly. "You are stronger than you realize, Leora. The moon chose you for a reason." She looked at him, her gray eyes searching his. "Why me?" she asked. "I am nothing compared to you. I was rejected. I am weak." Kaelin's gaze softened, and for a brief moment his pride fell away. "Strength is not measured by the approval of others," he said. "You have survived what others would not. You have awakened me when no one else could. That is strength beyond measure." Leora felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time, she did not feel small or unwanted. She was part of something greater, and the king beside her saw her not as fragile but as essential. Their bond deepened as they trained together, and with it, the tension between them grew. Small touches, accidental brushes of the hand, and the quiet exchange of glances spoke more than words. Leora felt a pull toward him, a desire to be close, yet also a fear of overstepping. Kaelin, for his part, struggled with centuries of pride and a lingering distrust of the world. He wanted to reach out, to protect her, to hold her close, yet he feared that attachment might weaken them both in the battles to come. It was during one of their training sessions that danger arrived again. A dark shape emerged from the shadows, faster than any human could move, and struck with deadly precision. Leora froze for a moment, her instincts screaming, but Kaelin was already moving. He deflected the attack with ease, then turned to her. "Now," he commanded, "use the moonlight. Leora felt the power rise within her. Her hands glowed faintly, the moonlight bending to her will. She directed it toward the attacker, a shield of silver energy that pushed the figure back. Kalen followed up, his strikes precise, striking fear into the intruder. Together they fought, their movements synchronized, a dance of power and instinct. When the shadow finally fled, Leora stood trembling, exhausted but exhilarated. I did it," she whispered, disbelief in her voice. Kalen's gaze softened, pride hidden beneath the stern expression he wore so well. "Yes," he said, "and there will be more challenges. But today you proved something. You are not weak. You are formidable." Days turned into weeks, and with each passing day, Leora's confidence grew. She could feel the magic within her strengthening, flowing more naturally, guided by the bond she shared with Kalen. She learned to anticipate danger, to move silently, and to call upon the moonlight with precision. But their growth did not go unnoticed. The Rogue Council, sensing the awakening of the Alpha King, began to move in the shadows. Messages arrived in whispered threats, warnings scrawled on leaves and stones, testing their resolve. The world that had seemed distant and dangerous now pressed close, reminding them that their journey was far from over. One evening, as they rested by a quiet river, Kalen spoke of the council's true power. "They will stop at nothing," he said, the water reflecting the silver of the moon in his eyes. "They do not fear me, they fear what we represent together. And they will try to break us, to turn our strengths against us." Leora listened, her heart pounding. "Then we must be ready," she said, "together." Kalen turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Yes," he said softly, "together." Their bond continued to grow, a silent understanding forming between them. Nights were filled with shared stories of the past, whispered confessions, and moments of quiet connection. Leora began to feel not just loyalty, but an undeniable attachment, a desire to be near him, to share in the danger and triumph alike. Kalen, too, found himself drawn to her courage, her resilience, and the way she could meet his gaze without fear, even when the world itself seemed to threaten them. Yet even as they grew closer, the threat of the council loomed large. One night, as the moon rose high, a new danger appeared, a figure more powerful than the last, cloaked in shadow and wielding magic that twisted the air around them. Leora sensed the danger first, her instincts screaming, and Kalen's reaction was instantaneous. They fought as one, a combination of skill, power, and trust. Leora's moonlight intertwined with Kalen's strength, creating a force that pushed back the dark figure. Every strike, every block, every surge of energy brought them closer, not just in skill but in bond. When the battle ended, the shadow fled, leaving only silence and the faint scent of smoke. Leora stood beside Kalen, trembling, her chest heaving. We did it," she whispered. Kalen's stormy eyes softened, and for the first time he allowed himself to show vulnerability. "Yes," he said, "but there will be more. The council will not give up, and neither will the powers that seek to control what we now share." As they looked out over the valley below, the moon casting silver light across the land, Leora realized the truth of what Kalen had said. Their bond was more than trust or friendship. It was a force, a connection that neither the council nor time itself could break. And yet, with every step they took, danger pressed closer, testing not just their strength but their courage, their resolve, and the depths of the bond forming between them. The air was thick with tension as Leora and Kalen stood at the edge of the cliff, overlooking the valley. Below, the moon hung high, casting silver light over the land, illuminating every shadow and every hidden movement. The Rogue Council had sent their deadliest agent yet, a warrior shrouded in dark magic, and Leora could feel the weight of danger pressing on them. Kalen's stormy eyes scanned the horizon, sharp and alert. "They will not wait," he said quietly, "and we cannot falter. The bond we share is our strength, but it will be tested like never before." Leora nodded, feeling the pulse of magic within her rise. The moonlight flowed through her veins, a warm, guiding energy that strengthened her resolve. She had trained, fought, and survived far beyond what she had thought possible. This moment was the culmination of everything: the loneliness, the rejection, the endless nights of fear and doubt. All of it had led her here, standing beside a king who had been frozen in time, ready to reclaim his destiny. They moved together through the shadows, silent and precise. Kalen led the way, his presence a shield against the unseen eyes that followed their every step. Leora felt the pull of their connection stronger than ever. She could sense his emotions, the flicker of worry he tried to hide, and it gave her courage. If he could survive centuries of betrayal, she could survive this battle. Together, they were unstoppable. The first attack came swiftly. From the trees below, shadows surged forward, twisting and shifting like living smoke. The rogue agent revealed themselves, a figure cloaked in darkness, eyes glowing with malicious intent. Their power radiated in waves, bending the air and shadow around them. Leora felt a shiver run through her, but she did not retreat. Kalen stepped forward, his presence commanding, and his voice rang out like thunder. "You will not touch her." His words carried the weight of authority, forcing the shadows to hesitate for a moment. In that instant, Leora let the moonlight flow through her hands glowing with a silver brilliance that illuminated the clearing. The rogue agent lunged, but Leora met them head-on, moonlight forming a protective shield around her. Kalen's strikes followed with precision, a storm of strength and skill. Every movement, every block, every push of energy was a dance of trust, instinct, and connection. They fought as one, the King and the Omega, their bond a force that even the darkest magic could not break. Time seemed to stretch as the battle raged. Leora's heart pounded, but she felt alive, powerful, and fearless. She could feel the energy of the moon guiding her, flowing through her hands and intertwining with Kalen's strength. Each strike from the rogue agent was met with a response, a counter, a defense born from trust and courage. Finally, after what felt like hours, the agent faltered, their magic unable to overcome the combined strength of the King and the Omega. With a final surge of moonlight, Leora pushed them back, and Kalen struck with precision, forcing the figure to retreat into the shadows. Silence fell, broken only by the rush of wind and the soft rustle of leaves. Leora sank to her knees, exhausted but exhilarated. We did it," she whispered, disbelief in her voice. Kalen knelt beside her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. His stormy eyes softened as he looked at her, pride hidden beneath the stern mask he usually wore. "Yes," he said quietly, "but this is only the beginning. The Council will not give up. They will test us again." Leora nodded, understanding the truth in his words. Yet she no longer felt fear. The bond they shared, forged in shadows and strengthened through trials, had given her a courage she had never known. She had faced rejection, betrayal, and the unknown, and she had survived. She was no longer fragile. She was strong. As dawn approached, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, Kalen led her to a hidden valley, a place untouched by time. Here they could regroup and plan their next move. The valley was quiet, serene, a stark contrast to the chaos of the past days. Leora felt a sense of peace she had never experienced. Kalen turned to her, his expression serious but gentle. "You have proven yourself, Leora. Your courage, your strength, and your heart, they have saved us both. But there is one final step. We must reclaim the throne of the kingdom, not just for power, but to bring balance back to the land." Leora's heart raced. The thought of standing beside him as the rightful rulers of the kingdom was overwhelming. "I will stand with you," she said, her voice firm. "Whatever it takes, I will be by your side." Kalen reached for her hand, a simple gesture that carried centuries of unspoken emotion. "Together," he said, and in that word was a promise of trust, loyalty, and unbreakable connection. They journeyed to the heart of the kingdom, where the council had entrenched themselves in the castle that had once belonged to Kalen. The land was scarred, the people fearful, but hope had not been extinguished. Leora felt the pulse of magic in the air, sensing the energy of the land responding to Kaelin's return. The people whispered his name, and their faith in the king, once lost, began to stir. The final confrontation came at the castle gates. The council's forces were vast and their magic strong, but Kaelin and Leora moved with confidence and precision. They fought not just for themselves, but for the people, for the land, and for the bond they shared. Leora's moonlight intertwined with Kaelin's strength, creating a force that broke through the darkness and shattered the council's hold on the kingdom. The battle was fierce, but their unity and trust could not be broken. Each step, each strike, each wave of energy was a testament to their bond, their courage, and the strength they had discovered in each other. At last, the council was defeated, their power scattered, and the kingdom freed from the shadow that had plagued it for so long. With the council's defeat, Kaelin ascended to the throne once more. The people, seeing their king restored and the Omega who had awakened him, began to heal alongside them. Leora, once rejected and alone, stood beside him as an equal, a partner, and a symbol of hope and courage. In the quiet of the restored castle, Kaelin spoke softly, his stormy eyes reflecting the silver light of the moon through the windows. "You have given me more than life, Leora. You have given me hope, trust, and a chance to heal." Leora smiled, a tear glistening in her eye. "And you have given me a purpose, a place, and a bond I never imagined I could have. Together, we are stronger than anything." They walked to the highest balcony of the castle, overlooking the kingdom bathed in the soft glow of dawn. The wind was gentle, carrying the scent of wildflowers and new beginnings. Leora felt a sense of completion, not just in victory, but in the journey they had shared, the trials, the fears, and the bond that had grown through every challenge. Kaelin took her hand, holding it firmly. "The kingdom is restored, but more than that, our souls are united. We have faced the darkness together, and we have emerged stronger." Leora looked at him, seeing not just a king, but a man who had been broken and frozen, who had found life again because she had dared to awaken him. "And we will face whatever comes next together," she said. As the first rays of sunlight touched the land, they stood side by side, no longer as the frozen king and the rejected Omega, but as rulers, partners, and companions bound by destiny. The world was vast and full of unknown challenges, yet for the first time, they faced it not with fear but with courage and love. The moon, high in the sky, shone down on them one last time before fading into the morning light, a silent witness to the bond that had been forged in shadows and solidified through trials.